Hi guys, Isaac from Chaff Games here. Today we're going to set up a lean mechanic. Leaning in FPS games is not as widespread as crouching and jumping, but common enough that I thought it was worth including in my FPS template. We'll be able to lean left and right while shooting or crouching, just like the games I'm showing you here. Also make sure that we don't clip into walls while we do it. Let's get started. Okay, so let's jump into the project. I'm gonna open up the player because that's what we're gonna be working on. The first thing that we're gonna start with is by adding another node for the camera. So we've got camera, main camera, and I'm gonna add a node 3D here so that we can pivot on it. I'm gonna make that a child of the camera, which it is, but I'm just gonna move it up, and then everything else is gonna be nested inside of that, and I'll rename it to lean_pivot. A lot of people will call this neck, like head and neck. I don't have that level of imagination. Also remember, if you are not using unique identifiers, that's what this percentage sign is, you may need to rename some of your variables in your player character script. Okay, so carrying on from the last episode, we used the animation tree to create a set of blends for our crouch. We're gonna be doing a pretty similar thing for the lean. So I'm gonna turn off the animation mixer so that I can actually make animations and see what they look like. I'm gonna come down to the animation player, which you can just click on that, or you can click on the character animation player. And I'm gonna press 1 on my number pad. Now this will say front, but because our player is actually facing backwards, it is the back of our player. So it makes it a little bit easier to know which is our left and right, since we do need to keep track of which one's which. So first things first, I'm gonna create a new animation here, and I'm gonna call it lean reset. We're gonna start with the reset because obviously that's the easiest to key. We'll click on the lean pivot and we'll just key in position and rotation. Fortunately for us, we don't need to worry about the height when we are dealing with the crouch because obviously this is a child of the camera, which we're affecting the height with the other 3 animations. So I'm gonna create another animation here and we'll call it lean left. And so you just decide on what you think is good for you. I've got a set of numbers that I like. I think left is going to be negative, right? Yeah. So somewhere around like 8 and 6 is good for me. And just for the height, I'm going to use -0.4. You can obviously pick whatever you like. We need a little bit of rotation. I'm going to set mine to 15 degrees and I'm going to keep both of them in. And once again, on the 0. So if you haven't done the crouch tutorial, we're going to use blend shapes to actually move between these animations. So we don't need a starting and end point. We just want this to be on 0, 0. And then I'll create another animation called lean right. And I will mirror those. So we don't need to change -0.4, but we'll change this to +0.8, and this will be -15 degrees. And we'll create that key, and we'll create that key. Okay, so now we can come back down to the animation mixer. I'll make it a little bit bigger so we can see what's going on. First thing we need to do is we need to add all 3 of our animations in. So I'll just click animation a couple of times. They're gonna fly in like this. So we'll have lean left, lean reset, and lean right. And I'll name these as well, just so that it's a little bit easier to keep track of if I ever need to get access to the individual animations. I haven't had that yet, but you never know what I might decide in the future. So lean right. Okay, and we want a blend 3 as usual. We'll do positive, negative, and lean reset. Not that there's anything negative about being lefty, it's just where it happens to land. And I'll create an add to. So this is how we get the animations to all work together. So we're gonna have add here, and this is gonna connect to the in, and then this connects to the output. Okay, so now we've got all of our 6 animations now blending together, and we'll rename this blend to lean blend, lean_blend. And the add to, we can probably leave blank. We'll just go crouch, lean, something like that, in case we need to access it at a later date. And if we click on the animation tree now, I'll make this a little bit bigger so we can see. we're gonna have the parameters crouch blend, crouch lean, and lean blend. So the add amount is always going to be 1 in this case. And if we now move the lean blend amount, we can see that move in between each stage. And as we crouch, we can see that it moves along with it. So we don't have to worry about whether or not we're crouched. You can see the camera's getting pretty low to the ground when I'm doing that lean. We might need to change that, so we'll keep an eye on that. Perhaps the parameters I've chosen are a bit too extreme. And we'll go back to 0. Okay, so now that we've done that, we just need a way of accessing them. I'm gonna come up to the project settings, and under the input map, I'm gonna add 2 new inputs for lean left and lean right. And I'll make lean left Q, and I'll make lean right E. And remember as well, you can always just, when you click on the plus, press the key on your keyboard to get the input. Okay, so now we're ready to write some scripts. So I'll open up the script. I'll pop this out here so it's a little bit easier for you guys to read and I don't have to zoom so much in the edit. We're going to create, I might make a space here, and another export category. And I'll just go export category and I'll call this one lean parameters. And come down here and we're gonna go export, and it's gonna be a range, and it'll be between 0 and really, we can make it probably 1. That would be really slow, but you know, and we'll call this variable lean speed. This is going to be how fast we blend between each of our lean states. So I'm gonna set mine by default to 0.2. I'll hit save there. I might also say that this is a float. I might also specify that this is a float. We need an enum this time to track the different states of the lean. Let's type left equals -1, comma. The next one will be center, and I'll make that 0, and I'll put the third one will be right, and it will be equal to 1. Okay, so that'll help us track the states. And then lastly, we're going to create a variable to, oops, gotta turn that caps lock off. Lastly, we're going to create a variable called lean tween. This is not gonna hold anything. It's just gonna be for us to create and kill our tweener if we need to. And so we'll come right below our input and right above our crouch, and we'll create a new function and we'll call it just lean. And it will take a blend underscore amount. And this is going to be an integer, and we'll just type pass for now. And then we'll come back up to our input and we'll set that up. So this time I'm going to use if input rather than if event, because we need to use .is action just pressed, which wouldn't be found in event. And I'll pass in the lean left action, and I'll call lean. And I'll use that enum that we created with left. And then if input dot is action just pressed lean right, and we'll do the exact same thing, and we'll pass in the right enum. Okay, and actually above this, we're going to create the released. So we'll go if input dot is action just released. We'll go lean left, and we'll write or input dot is action just released lean right. And what we'll do here is we'll also do a check, and this can sort of be optional. I like to do it. I'll also do a check to make sure that we don't have another input for lean already pressed. So let's say if you're pressing the left lean, then you press the right lean, you lean right, but you also release the Q or the lean left key, you don't want to come back to center. You probably want to keep remaining lean right. Maybe you just pressed the wrong button or something like that. So I'm going to add another check here. I'll write if not, and I'll open some brackets here, and I'll write input dot is action pressed here, lean left, or input.isAction pressed lean right. So these need to be isAction pressed, not isAction just pressed. So we're going to check to make sure those keys aren't pressed. And if we've released a lean left or lean right and a lean left or lean right isn't pressed, then we'll lean and we'll pass in the center constant. And those are our actions there. And we can come down to the lean and we can write the code here. This is pretty straightforward. So I'm going to write if lean tween, and then I'll write lean tween dot kill. Now this is kind of a bit of a tween thing. So you basically, if you create a tween and you want to do another action, you need to kill it before you create another action. So you check to see if the lean tween is active. If it is, then you need to kill it and start a new one. This is something that you'll find in the docs for the lean. You'll find that it still works without doing that. It's just what they say that you should do. So I'm gonna say lean tween equals get tree dot create tween, and then I can pass in lean tween dot tween property, and it's going to want the object, which is our animation tree. This is an export variable that we set up in the crouch tutorial. So if you don't have that, you can create it here and just set it in your properties panel over here. Okay, so now we need to get the name of the parameters. So we've got the lean blend. We don't want crouch lean, we want lean blend. We're going to copy the property path. So right click, copy property path. We'll come back to our script and we'll come down to, I'm lost. And we'll come down to the lean tween dot tween property, and we'll pass in that parameter, or that path, I should say. And the final variant will be the blend amount, and the duration will be the lean speed. There. Okay, so things should work at this point. One thing that I want to remember that I've done is I've turned on the animation mixer here to make sure that it's active, otherwise it won't work in the animation tree because we turned that off at the start. So let's give this a run and see if it goes. And you can see we're leaning from left to right, and it is very extreme, but I'll leave it there for the purposes of this demonstration. So now if we come behind a building, we can, poke our head out. It's so extreme that the rotation is a little bit warped, because you've got to remember that we're rotating the entire kinematic body. So as we push the camera out towards the right or the left, we're actually rotating around the center point of the kinematic body. So this will look a little bit weird. So maybe 0.8 is a little bit too extreme, but for this, I need it to demonstrate clipping, which is one of the issues that we're going to run into. So obviously right now, there's nothing stopping our camera from just going straight in and clipping into some of these objects. Do we clip into the ground? I haven't. Okay, we're not clipping into the ground, which is good. So maybe that's okay, but yeah, we do clip into pretty much everything here. What? We're inside the box. Oh, it looks weird. So let's address that. Now I've experimented with a few different ways, but I've also observed in a couple of games, and I chose these games because they're the ones that I had installed on my hard drive, but I looked at Crysis Remastered and I looked at Prey, and both of those games, what they tend to do is actually, they seem to be detecting that you are against a wall, and instead of moving the camera, they just rotate it. And I'll have something on screen showing that. And so we're gonna do the same thing. I've experimented with, if you've downloaded the Pro version, there's just a collision shape that moves with the lean that will prevent you from pushing into the wall. But I think what I'm gonna do here is a little bit nicer, because you'll get some movement as you come close to a wall, and you can continue walking straight and your head will move back up, essentially. So what we need to do is we need to create a set of raycasts on either side of the character. I'm going to use, I said raycast, but I'm actually going to use shapecast so that we have a wider coverage area. And I'm going to create these in the camera node. They can be anywhere they want, but I'm going to put them here. Just don't make them a child of the lean pivot because we do rotate that and we don't really want that. Okay, so I'm going to come up to the camera, click node, and I'm just going to type shapecast. I'm going to type shape and I'm going to get the shapecast, and I'm going to set this position here. It should just be by default up higher. I'm going to drop that down so that it's in the center of the player's head, so -0.3 for me. And I'm going to give it a shape. I'll make it a sphere, and it won't be -1, but we will be casting out in the X direction here. At the moment it's 1, this radius is too big. So obviously if we're doing this, if we come from the top, you can see that if we were flush against a wall with our face, this would collide, which we don't want. So we actually want it to be a little bit smaller than the size of our player. Now mine's 0.45, so I'm gonna make mine 0.4, and you can see now it's a little bit smaller. So at no point will it collide at the front or the back. Just as we start to turn, it will, and it'll bring the camera towards the center. So the target position, I can reduce that down. So that's gonna be 0.85, I guess. And we're going to call this one lean. This one's going to the right, lean right collider. And I'm going to duplicate that. I'll rename it, and we'll call it lean left collider. And the cool thing about duplicating them is that these spheres will remain the same. So changing one in the lean left will change both. I actually think this is, sometimes you don't want this, but in this case, a desired approach, because you want them to sort of be the same all the time. I'll change the target position of the lean left to the negative, and we'll see that we've got 2 either side. And also with the collision masks, make sure that it's obviously set up for your particular game. My collision for the world is layer 1, and I also need to add the objects collision layer. So I've got all my physics objects on the 3rd layer. So presumably anything that you think you might be able to clip through, add that layer. So I'm going to add those 2 layers to the collision mask here. And that's pretty much it. Obviously you want exclude parent, but that's default. Okay, so now that we've got both of those, we can come back to the player character and we can get into the script here. Now you could just drag and drop these particular collision shapes in here, but I'm gonna do the same thing I did with the crouch collision to be a little bit consistent. The main reason I'm deciding to do this is because it becomes a little bit nicer in the properties panel that you can see what variables are where rather than just in the script. I like that a little bit more. It's just an experiment. If you don't want to do that and you just want to drag them in, you can do that too, the traditional way. So we'll go lean left collider, that it's a shape cast 3D, and I'll copy that, we'll call it lean right collider, and we'll save that, and we'll come back over to this, and it's going to need those to be given. So we'll pass in the lean right collider and the lean left collider. So now you can see what colliders are going where. Obviously this shape cast is not named, so I might do that now. Crouch detection, no, we called it collider. We'll call it collider. And I'll need to, it's automatically renamed, so that's good. That's in there, and we still need to be able to know where to move those cameras. Now, because we're using the animation tree, we're sort of locked into using the animation tree the way that we are, because we're setting the blends. So we can no longer affect the position of the lean pivot and the rotation of that in code. It won't work, at least my testing. If you know a way around that, let me know. So what we need to do is actually create 2 new sets of animations. So I'll come back down and I'll turn off the animation mixer for the animation tree so that we can sort of draw some animations. Come back into this front view. I'll turn off the environment because that's getting kind of annoying. And I'll open up the animation and we'll just look at lean left. And I'll make a duplicate of this and I'll call it lean left collision. And what we can do is just come into the lean pivot And in this case, obviously, we're going to be against a wall, so we don't want to be outside of the collision shape. So we can bring it back to 0. I'm going to bring the position of the lean pivot node back to 0. I'm going to keep the rotation, but I'm going to reduce it slightly. So instead of 15, I'm going to make it 5, so it's less rotated. I just think that looks nicer. And then I'll go to lean right, and I'll also duplicate that animation, and we'll just call it lean right collision. And same exact thing, I'm going to reset the position of the lean pivot node, and I'm going to change the rotation to -5, and we'll key that in. Okay, so now we can come back into our animation tree, and we can set up some new blends. I'll turn this back on, and we'll just create some space here. They need to almost have a pop out for this thing because it gets pretty busy. Okay, so I'm going to create a blend 2, 2 blend 2s, and I'm going to add some animations. Let's just make some more space. So this animation will be the lean left collision, and we'll call it left collision. And this blend, we can call it left collision blend. And what we actually want to do is have that as the in for the lean left and the left collision as the blend, and then pass that into the blend 3 for the lean. And we'll do the exact same thing down here. We'll add the lean right collision. I'll just call this right collision, and we'll rename this to right underscore collision blend. And once again, we'll add that to the in and add that to the blend. Doesn't really matter which one's in and which one's blend, as long as they're the same for both. And then now that we've done that, we should be good to go. Let's have a look at this. You can test this out in the editor. So let's say that we're leaning to the left, and we come in contact with the wall. So we want to increase the left collision blend to 1, and you'll see that it just comes back. And this should work pretty much in every situation. Okay, so that's nice. We'll just reset these variables and make sure it's all working as normal. Okay, so now we want to pass these into our function. So we'll come into the player character, and we need to create a new function, and we'll create this function under the lean, and we'll just call it lean. We'll call it lean collision. Doesn't need to take any parameters. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to type animation tree, and we'll use the square brackets, and we'll paste in that blend path here, left collision blend, blend amount, and we're going to make that equal to, and we'll lerp it, and I'm just going to do this on a new line. So the from variant will be the same as before, animation tree, and we'll pass in the blend parameter. Next one's going to be the 2, which is going to be, and what I like to do here is similar to what we did with the crouch, which is to type left lean left collider dot is colliding, and we need to make that a float before I forget. And the reason we need to make it a float instead of an int is because the animation tree path here is a float, and lerps only work with the same type. You can't mix types. So we make float lean left collider is colliding, and then the final variant will be the lean speed, which I think works well. It's not as smooth as a tween, but it's okay. Okay, so moving on to the next one, we can make it animation tree, and we'll get the square brackets. And let me just go back to here, and I'm going to do the same thing as before. I'll copy that lean parameter, copy property path, right collision blend, come back over to the script, and we'll pass that in. Do the exact same thing here. Lerp, and I'll put that down on a new line, and we'll type animation tree bracket, I'll pass in that again, and we'll type float lean right collider dot is colliding, and then the final variant will be the lean speed again. Okay, so let's just walk through this a second, make sure that we've got everything right. We're changing the animation trees parameter for the left lean and the right lean. Left collision blend and the right collision blend. So when we are colliding, that's going to report a 1. And when we're not, that will return a 0, this particular line here. And so that'll actually change the blend. So we'll look at this. If we're leaning and we are colliding, which would be true, so that would be a 1, and it will rise up like that. So I think that should work. Last thing we need to do is just call this function. I'm going to do it in the physics process. There are other ways that you could go about doing this, where you could detect the distance and gradually move up the camera, but for the purposes of this tutorial, just know that you can do it this way. And then if you want to delve into the math of actually calculating the amount that you need to move, then you can do that. We just need to call the function up the top here, lean collision. We don't need to do anything else. Okay, so let's jump in here and see if everything's working still. And we've crashed. Convert argument 2 from float to int. And this will just be a problem with our thing here. I mentioned before, so to make absolutely sure that these are all coming back as floats, we can just add the float wrapper to these. We should be able to run that again. Okay, so that we can lean. So now that we can lean, if we're flat up against a wall and we lean, you can tell that it doesn't go all the way like it does on the other side. And if we move away from the wall, we move out, and vice versa. If we move into the wall, move out from the wall. And so that's just a nice addition to stop you from colliding with things. Like if you're inside this hole and you press the lean button, you're not going to go through the camera. And likewise, if you're for whatever reason leaning this way and you turn your camera, it'll bring you back in before you clip through it. Another really cool thing about this is that if you're sort of leaning, I don't know why you would be, but if you were leaning this way and then you walk towards the wall, it'll just push you back in, which looks pretty nice, to be honest. And we'll just test against this as well. If we get up close to this, whoop, we can still clip through it. So we need to check the collision shape of the right collider. It's not set. So we come back in, make sure that this works on both sides. It won't lean in that way, we won't lean in that way. Awesome, that's great. There's a couple of extra things that we can do to polish this off. Now I'm a big fan of tweens, as you guys know, and I think you can add a lot of personality to this lean by changing a few things. So I'm going to set this up as in the lean tween, set ease, I'm going to set it to ease out, and I'm going to set the transition to trans back. And that'll give us a nice little bounce when we lean, like this, which is pretty cool. Now we won't get that when we go in and out, but you know. It's nice, and you can sort of play around with them and pick one that you think works best for your project. Another thing that I really don't like, and I mean, it's really just up to you if you want to put this in or not, is that I'm not a fan of leaning when you can jump. So I'm not a fan of leaning and jumping at the same time. I don't really like that they can be done at the same time. So I'm going to add an additional check for if is on floor before I can lean. So you can't lean when you're jumping. And if you are jumping, we'll come down to the physics process here. where is if action pressed. And if we're gonna jump, then I'm gonna write lean, and I'm gonna pass in the center constant there. And so now that will prevent us from leaning while we jump. If we press it, we're gonna come back out. And that's a personal preference of mine, so you guys don't have to do that. Alrighty guys, that's how you create a lean mechanic. I really hope you found this video helpful. As always, please remember to like and subscribe if you did. And if you're feeling extra generous, you can always join the YouTube membership or find us over on Patreon. You'll get access to all my videos in advance, access to my Udemy course, and top tiers get access to my game assets like the FPS Pro as well. Next week, we'll be looking at sprinting. Hopefully that won't take me more than half an hour like the last few videos. I'm Isaac from Chaff Games, and I'll see you next time.